I just
To
hate
the
blocking the flag's crest.
What could it possibly be? I can't tell anymore that Isaac's covering part of it.
That's right.
When I was growing up in elementary school, people said that it looked like two faces coming together on edges of it. If you look at the white part instead of the red part, and now I can't unsee it. It was in the 4th grade.
I
See the
tried to
nose
look
that
behind
looks
me, but
down
it's
into the
too
big part?
big. It's too up close. I can't see. I can't
Well,
tell.
when next time you look at it, you will see that it looks like two people with their heads together, kind of arguing. Or
Now,
politely disagreeing.
Kris, you're probably old enough, like I am, to recall when, at least in elementary school, we sang the national anthem. I think every single day is
Yep.
how we started, and once a week we sang "God Save the Queen." Now, God
Yes.
Save the King. Isaac, was that something that your school was doing when you were growing up?
No. So I went to French immersion school, and we sang the national anthem every morning in basically half English, half French. But we never did any religious things because it was a public school, not a Catholic school.
I mean, I would suggest that "God Save the King" isn't particularly religious. It's the anthem of the monarch of Canada, but yeah, I would be surprised if kids in school nowadays would even know any of the words to that song. So
Either of them. People often refer to it as the royal anthem as well. For the first time, I sang "God Save the King" out loud at the most recent Remembrance Day ceremony here in Lethbridge. Last time I wasn't able to because it was too upsetting. So, because you're raised singing "God Save the Queen" and now the Queen is gone. I'm old enough, totally dating myself. We sang "O Canada." We sang "God Save the Queen" once a week, and we said the Lord's Prayer.
wow.
In public school, in elementary school, right up until the 4th grade in British Columbia. So I guess I'm kind of dating myself. All right, did we want to get this thing started, gentlemen? Welcome to Off the Record here at True North. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm joined here by our lovely regular guests, Isaac and William. Gentlemen, we've got so much to talk about. I just got the paper version of my Epoch Times or Epic Times. I never pronounced that properly. And it's got the huge Trump win. We're going to get to that. It's on the front page. But I really wanted to kick things off first with something that we at the Taxpayers Federation noticed. Pardon me for barging in on it. But so, Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault, you know how he just loves carbon taxes? Well, he's at the whatever UN climate summit where they fly there in their jets and they burn all this stuff and they waste all your money. He's at some summit and he's actually pushing for a global carbon tax. So, two of his favorite things, world government and carbon taxes, come together. And there he is at this UN climate summit pushing for a global carbon tax on shipping. So shipping typically is goods that are shipped by cargo that go across the ocean. And he's proposing to do this and charge every country in the world that can afford it. That's a sliding scale. And that the money would, of course, go to poor countries for them to somehow reduce their carbon footprint or whatever. We know largely that this would just get wasted. Now, I did need to point out that the folks, the pointy heads at the UN, have been pushing for a global carbon tax on things like shipping for years. They keep on trying this stuff. It's the same thing when they try to get people to eat crickets or not eat as much red meat or whatever. But this time, they have found an ardent dance partner because there has never been a carbon tax that Minister Guilbeault has made eye contact with that he has not fallen madly in love with. What do you guys think? Do you think that this is a chance that they might be able to convince them to actually put this thing through? Like, do you think they'd get countries signing on to this? William, do you want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, this COP conference just, makes me cringe every time I hear it happening. It might as well be called COP-a-feel conference because every time they have one, they want to reach into your pants and pick your wallet and grab a few more dollars for whatever crazy project that they've just come up with. So, yeah, I mean, if you ask around, and I think the US election really brought home the case of this, people aren't exactly saying, I have just too much money in my pockets. I have too much disposable income and not enough things to spend it on. My rent is too low. My groceries are too cheap. Transportation is too cheap and affordable. And so, what I really need is a big government tax to come and make my life even more expensive to get rid of some of my excess cash. It would be ludicrous if it weren't quite so criminal and sad. And yeah, we're coming up on Christmas. It's the busiest shopping time of the year. A lot of people are buying things from faraway places that need to be shipped. My family's waiting for Black Friday and Amazon to put on some deals to look at what we're
Same.
going to buy for my nephews. And now we're going to make that more expensive because everything that gets shipped is going to have a new carbon tax. And then you're going to send it to developing countries who, of course, their first priority isn't the fact that huge swaths of their populations are unemployed and can't afford healthcare and maybe don't have enough to eat. We're going to pay for them to have the privilege of releasing slightly less carbon. And, I'm absolutely certain that money won't be spent on other priorities, because when I talk to people who work with third world charity groups, they're always telling me it's all about the carbon, not about food and shelter and healthcare.
Clean water, luxuries like that. Isaac, what was your take on this?
Yeah, Kris, I was trying to go through in my head and think to myself, which of the countries at COP29 here would even fathom agreeing to something like this? Of course, President-elect Donald Trump hasn't had his inauguration date yet, but I'm thinking, imagine Guilbeault trying to pitch this to Trump. I mean, he would obliterate him. There's absolutely no chance that Trump would do something like this. In fact, we've seen over the recent days how Trump has been coming out, in fact, in partnership with Danielle Smith as recently as today, on prioritizing making energy as cheap as possible because he understands that is how you make a strong economy, not by making it expensive. And by the way, we still haven't seen any evidence from the liberals or anyone else that this carbon tax does anything to reduce carbon emissions because our carbon emissions keep going up, but so too does the carbon tax. So really, there's no logical reason that anyone would sign on to this, I think, and we'll see what happens at COP.
No, you nailed it there. To be clear, here in Canada, the carbon tax is a disaster, but the government just keeps on digging. Like any sane person with an ounce of common sense, if they dig themselves into that hole first job, stop digging. But they just keep on going for it. And now they're turning their shovels on other countries, or at least trying to. So here in Canada, we actually already have 3 carbon taxes. We have the first carbon tax, which is often referred to as the retail carbon tax. That's the one that adds like $13 per fill up of a minivan, $20 per fill up of a pickup truck, over $400 this winter alone here in Alberta. The carbon tax is going to cost us to heat our homes with natural gas. Truckers, they're costing like $200 extra just for filling up with diesel. And that's just the one carbon tax. We have the second carbon tax, which is the highest in British Columbia. It's a form of government fuel regulation where they basically penalize a company of how dare you, oil and gas company, produce something like oil and gas. We're going to fine you. And then, of course, the company takes that fine and they pass it on down the hose. And that's you, again, filling up your vehicle. In British Columbia, it's on average floating cost because they do a whole bunch of weird online credits and markets going on. It's around 18 cents extra per liter of gasoline and diesel. Trudeau, legit, he saw British Columbia. He saw how high their price of gasoline and diesel was. And he's like, that's awesome. I'm going to do that across the whole country. I'm not kidding. He used BC as a template. And so now we have a second carbon tax that's federal. It's not as high as it is in BC, but we still have it. The third carbon tax we have is often referred to as the industrial carbon tax. Really similar to what I just explained with the second carbon tax, but this time it's big companies that are paying these credits and offsets and all this other jazz. At the end of the day, that just makes our stuff cost more. So now we have these 3 carbon taxes already in Canada. We also have record numbers of people saying they cannot make ends meet, that they're within $200 of not making all their minimum payments on their bills. That's also known as nearly going bankrupt. Okay. And we also have record demand for food banks, especially from working families. So what the Trudeau government does is say, you know what, these carbon taxes are so super awesome and they're not reducing emissions. You're absolutely right, Isaac. So let's make the whole world pay for one. Like, it's just, anyway, I have confidence that, how did that go? One of my friends said, I think a Trump-sized hole has been driven through that plan. So I don't think that one's going to happen. Speaking of President-elect Trump, okay, former presidents are supposed to be given the honorific of president, William, but he's a former president and now a president-elect. So do we call him President-elect President Trump, or what do we call him now?
Just see how many times we can put the word president in front of the name Trump. I know there'd be quite a number of people who would support that. It is true that U.S. office holders do retain their titles for life, but I guess in the case, it's also though rare to have someone who was a president then sort of leave public life, voluntarily or otherwise, to then have them come back into public life. Again, it's only happened a handful of times in U.S. history.
Yeah, so I'm just going to keep it simple. President Trump, who is not yet inaugurated, he is making good on some of his promises. He has assigned Elon Musk. If you don't know who that dude is, I can't help you. And he's also assigned Vivek Ramsey, who is a kind of a fascinating character. He actually ran for the leadership of the Republicans. Super dynamic, interesting guy. What I find fascinating is he's appointed these two gentlemen to, what would you call it, guys? A task force? A mission to reduce government waste and improve government efficiency. And the acronym, I'm not kidding, for folks who are on X or Twitter, is Department of Government Efficiency. DOGE. Okay, this is an actual tweet from Elon Musk. I mean, the guy can definitely move things. It's not just rockets. So that's music to Taxpayers Federation ears. The idea that you could actually go through departments, get rid of entire departments if they're inefficient and just a big waste of money, find actual waste like we have here at the Taxpayers Federation, where we spent taxpayers' money, sending sex toys to a show in Germany, like completely stupid things. Do we think this will make meaningful change, though? And can they? Because the way that their system is set up, don't they have to get this stuff through Congress? And will they be able to do that? Like, I actually don't know.
Yeah, Isaac, do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, here's what I'll say, because obviously, and I'm sure many people felt the same way when I first heard about this DOGE or dog, I don't know how it's
DOGE,
pronounced.
that's how you pronounce
DOGE task force or department. The first thing I, of course, thought of was Argentina leader Javier Milei, who his whole campaign was based on the fact that he would slash public service to the bone, essentially. And I think we have a clip, in fact. Do we want to show that right now?
Oh, yes, we do. Play that tape.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera. Aunque te resistas. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación, afuera. Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social, afuera. Ministerio de Educación, adoctrinamiento, afuera. Ministerio de Transporte, afuera. Ministerio de Salud, afuera. Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, afuera. Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
Yeah, so
I have that saved
obviously
in my phone.
Milei's been in office now for just about a year. I think he became the president in December 2023. So I was curious, what has slashing these public services done? And I just looked quickly online, and I seen AP came out yesterday saying Argentina has seen the lowest inflation that it's had in the last 3 years. Okay, what else? Their GDP per capita at a record. I mean, all the things you'd hope for. So obviously this is not having a negative effect and may, in fact, be having a positive effect. I'm curious to see if similar cuts would have the same effect in America. And obviously with Trump prioritizing energy development and otherwise, that is going to have a strong effect on the economy as well.
Yeah, I can say, I think it's unclear to me how much power this new group, task force, agency, department will have. It doesn't look like, at least at first, they're setting it up as a fully fledged department that would have a secretary and cabinet power. But I think one of the things it will have is an ability to expose examples of government waste and mismanagement. And I think that public opinion pressure will be very valuable to President Trump when he starts a campaign to try and cut wasteful spending. And I mean, we have wasteful spending up in Canada. There's a ton of it, including just a massive bloated bureaucracy that has, tens of thousands of more people, maybe even hundreds of thousands more than we need. Down in the States, in some ways, it can be even worse, because when they're trying to get a bill through Congress, every congressman or congresswoman will have a demand that they want to put on. And in order to get their vote, you sometimes have to buy them. And it means, a bill for child's health care includes funding for erectile dysfunction medication, or, a bill to study farm products in the Midwest includes salmon fishing out in the Pacific Northwest. There's all sorts of these things. They're called Christmas trees. Everybody likes to hang little spending ornaments on them. But I'm personally very excited about what the Department of Government Efficiency is going to find. And it really takes the air out of the sails of people who talk about how government is this force for good in the lives of everyday people, how we need government and how government spending is efficient. And when the government tackles problems, that's the best way to solve it. The late, great Margaret Thatcher, my personal political hero, some minister came to her and said, we've identified this problem. And his solution was to create a new ministry that would be responsible for this problem. And she looked him in the eye and said, if the existence of the ministry and the minister depends on this problem continuing to exist, then it will never be solved. We will never rid ourselves of it once jobs depend on having this problem be around. So I say Godspeed to the new Department of Government Efficiency, and please find some places to cut wasteful spending. That would be great.
Yeah, I think I've got hope in that. I think this will change the momentum and the tone. The very idea that they're now openly saying we need Ron Paul in here to come help. Like, for the longest time, Dr. Ron Paul, bless his heart, has been trying to reduce government spending, reduce government waste, expose government corruption, hold government to account. And for the longest time also, it's, advocacy organizations similar to ours in the United States, like the Americans for Tax Reform with Grover Norquist, trying to restrain spending. And there's always been a healthy push behind that, but it hasn't gone mainstream or viral in an awful long time. And to be able to see something like small government, like dramatically reducing the size and scope and power and spending of government, to make that shiny and attractive again is huge. I think we do have a clip. Do we want to play that clip of Vivek Ramsey? It's just really inspiring. Let's roll that.
Reject the impulse. It's going to happen in the next 4 years. We will face temptation to say that we want to replace that left-wing nanny state with a right-wing nanny state. The right answer to that question is hell no. The right answer is to dismantle the nanny state. We will face the temptation to say we want to replace the left-wing regulatory state with a right-wing regulatory state. The right answer to that is hell no. We want to dismantle the regulatory state. We will face the temptation to say, hey, we want to staff the bureaucracies with our own people and claim that we want to reform them. No. The right answer is to get in there and shut down the bureaucracy. That's how we save this country. That's what our founding fathers fought for in 1776. And if we do, then we don't have to be this nation in decline anymore that we've become.
Amazing hearing that. And for the handful of folks who are watching who like big government and they think that we need big government to take care of us and do everything, I just heartily encourage you to really think again. Ask yourself if whatever it is that needs to be done could be done better by honest, earnest private citizens or a charity group or an advocacy organization. I'll give you a quick example, and I won't get too graphic because otherwise I might start crying. You guys might remember that there was a case in British Columbia off one of the Gulf Islands where they had deer that Parks Canada wanted to get rid of, right? Okay, So this became kind of a, it was a thing, right? And kudos to the reporters in Vancouver who dug up this story. They did a great job. And they phoned us about a year ago. So what was happening is taxpayers were paying it was like $1 million, something crazy. It was a crazy amount of money for foreigners, New Zealanders, if I recall correctly, sharpshooters, to shoot deer out of a circling helicopter. Okay, so I grew up in BC. You could get people, hunters with legal firearms, to come shoot deer for free. They will fill up their trucks themselves and bring all their gear themselves. Just open the bag limit and your problem will be gone. But wait, there's more. This is where it gets really upsetting. So they got all this pushback about them hiring people to shoot deer out of helicopters and wasting taxpayers' money doing this. You know what they actually went and did? They set up nets in the forest and in the meadows of this island. They set up netting to keep the deer in a certain place. Anyone watching this who has a lick of experience with wildlife, especially deer, knows what happened here. These deer tangled themselves in these nets by themselves for weeks at a time and thrashed themselves to death. That's government. That is a perfect example of we should get the government to fix this. No, you really shouldn't. And the more you dig into things, the more the government screws up. So yes, I, for one, I keep that little DOGE thing on my phone because I wanted to inspire people to reduce government waste and to cut taxes. This one's also ticking me off. Who wants to lead off the Remembrance Day stuff?
Yeah, so hopping from the federal government's failures to the municipals, also on a broad scale, we saw a lot of backlash across the country from woke initiatives that were implemented at Remembrance Day, like lengthy land acknowledgements, even pro-Hamas activism, and all of really these initiatives that overlooked the importance of Remembrance Day, which is, of course, honoring fallen soldiers. I think we have a picture of Harrison Faulkner. He kind of went through the list here. If we could show that, yeah, he this isn't by no means all encompassing, but it really did list a lot of the good ones here. I mean, take your pick. I don't even know where to start because they're all as ridiculous as the last. Is there any one of these that stands out to either of you?
The one that jumped out at me at first was because a friend of mine who lives in Nova Scotia sent it to me, was being told that active veterans, so yes, Remembrance Day is absolutely about honoring the fallen. It's also to give a nod to our veterans who came home, who are still dealing with what they saw in war. And to tell them, don't show up in your uniform, like that really got my hair standing up. So that one really stood out. I think there was another one where it was in Ottawa and they sang a song in a foreign language, which, to be really clear, so taking off my Taxpayers Federation hat completely, I used to work with Veterans Affairs Canada. A lot of the men in my family have served in the armed forces, including in places like Cyprus. Remembrance Day ceremonies are solemn and really simple. Like, we've been doing them this way for about 100 years, okay? You play last post, you might have a fly past, hopefully you have a prayer, you lay wreaths, you honor the fallen. They're solemn and beautiful and meaningful. You don't need to add stuff to them. So the two that popped into my mind were telling living veterans, don't show up in your uniform. And then also that there was a different song that was shoved into this ceremony, I think at the last minute at a school in Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, there were just some, again, they would be laughable if they weren't so deeply insulting and painful to people who, have friends, family members, and loved ones serving or who have served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I did enjoy, or rather shake my head at the example of Langley, British Columbia, where they only had one reading from a religious text during their ceremony, and it was a reading from the Quran, which I think a lot of people would find surprising. If you look at the people who generally have served in our armed forces, they do represent a whole range of different religions, But the major one, I think, would be Christianity, particularly for people who fought in, say, World War I or World War II on behalf of our country. So the fact that they went out of their way to pick one that doesn't represent the majority of people, and then said, but we shall have no other readings of this apart from this reading from the Quran. And, you have to wonder what goes through the minds of some of these woke politicians when they decide to use these events in order to try and further one of their pet causes. Mayor Gondek in my beloved city of Calgary, less beloved mayor herself, she decided to do quite a lengthy land acknowledgement at the beginning of her Remembrance Day ceremony, and did indeed refer to the people there and the veterans themselves as settlers on colonized land. And I think, Canada has a day to, reflect on Indigenous issues. We have a National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Why are we now trying to co-opt the one day that we have, especially for veterans, who in many cases gave, the ultimate sacrifice, paid the ultimate price for our freedom and for our liberty? Why are we now trying to co-opt this day into serving some other purpose, some other special interest, some other woke agenda item? I think it is, not just sad, but I think, deeply offensive to people who do have family members who are serving and have served in our armed forces.
I think this also speaks to a lack of understanding and knowledge of our history. I think it's easier for people to do things like this if they haven't really thought about it and they haven't really learned about it. Just to put it glibly, it's easy to beak off and make something your own when you truly haven't empathized with what you're talking about. And to put a pin on it, November 11th was for Armistice Day. It was for the end of what they hoped would be the war to end all wars. Millions of people died. Millions of them. Mostly young men. And Dr. John Robson, a friend of mine, pointed something out to me years ago, and it stayed with me. He said it isn't just those millions of young men. Think of the children who were never born. Ever. And their children, until here we are right now. And it, of course, also led into the Second World War. A lot of historians are now simply referring to it as the 20th Century War, because there was a big lull in the middle, but the two are inextricably connected. So I would just urge people who want to make it their day or change it or whatever your thing is, it doesn't matter. Really read about it. Really think about it. Imagine being someone in one of those countries, or being a soldier shipped off, or being their mother, or being their wife or their sister. Imagine living through that, truly. And then ask yourself if you really need to do that for a few hours in the morning on one day. Or maybe you could wait till the next day, or even in the afternoon, once people have gone home. Did we want to go to the school board? Because this one was a little bit funny, and I think I need something to cheer me up.
I do have to say that coming off that very somber topic, we, now have an example of, maybe we'll just revisit that first one about there's no wasteful spending in government.
Yes.
And say, oh, well, are you sure? Because what we had recently was what I'm calling a School Trustees Gone Wild Italy edition. And honestly, if it weren't actually true, you would have a hard time making something like this up. And I wrote down so I would get it right, the Brant, Haldimand, Norfolk Catholic District School Board. So this would be a school district in southwestern Ontario encompassing Brant, Norfolk, and Haldimand County. Well, they have two schools that needed some art. Specifically, they wanted some religious art. And I guess they thought, well, if we want religious art, where do we have to go to get that? Clearly, none is made in Canada. None is made in North America. The only place, apparently, that they could get it was Italy. So they spent more than $50,000 on travel expenses to go to Italy for a week to buy $100,000 worth of religious art, which they subsequently brought back to Canada. And I'll just give you a little list here. Some of the things they spent on. Well, one of the things I have to laugh is their trip to Italy included 2 nights in Germany, which is a country famous for not being Italy. So a lot of people wonder why that was. Well, apparently, according to the board chair who has recognized the error of his ways, it's quite a long flight from Italy, or to, Canada to Italy. So they needed a night to recover. They needed a night to get caught up on the rest and on the jet lag. And apparently they needed one at the end of their trip as well, which explains why there's 2 nights in Germany, in Italy. Why they...
But William, just a second, William, it's not like Italy has major cities, right?
No,
like it doesn't have
I
Rome
can't think of
or
one.
anything.
No. I mean, Rome and Milan and Naples and none of people. I don't think Italy has any tourism either. I don't think people go to Italy as tourists for these things. They
That would have
only
been way too hard. They had to land in Germany and then commute.
for the religious art. And so the real question is, though, would they have really been so tired given that their average flight cost was $7,000 a piece? Which, for those of us who have occasionally studied flights, know that they flew business class in the nice lie flat pods that they have at the front of the plane. So why did they have jet lag when they spent $28,000 on their flights for these 4 people so that they could get a good night's sleep over the Atlantic Ocean? They also stayed in what have been described as luxury or deluxe hotel rooms and suites. During their course there, they enjoyed a limousine ride at one point. Maybe there was a lack of parking at the religious art factory that they were visiting, so they rented a limo. They enjoyed several gourmet boozy dinners too while they were in Italy. Total cost coming in at $50,000. So for anybody out there who doesn't think there's wasteful spending in government, I would just urge you to look at this example. When places are crying out for funding for education, to hire more teachers, to hire more teaching assistants, to have more resources in classrooms, well, this Brant Haldeman Catholic School District group, they decided 4 people, $50,000. I tell you, if I ever am planning a luxury trip to Italy, I want to get that school board to do my trip planning. They know how to put on a luxury vacation.
This is excellent. And it really puts the point on it that there is just so much waste. And to be clear, this is just what we know about. It's not like this is the one bad school board in all of Ontario. No. This is just the one that we've heard about. There's tons of stuff that we've never heard about. At the Taxpayers Federation, we do the annual Teddy Waste Awards where we hand out golden pig statues to levels of government that waste your money in spectacular fashion. We do it to make fun of it because otherwise you'd cry. Like, it's such a huge waste of money. And yeah, this sounds like, I don't know, the $100,000 or $200,000 that our federal politicians blow on airplane food. And they say, oh, it was normal airplane food. Meanwhile, it's stuff you can't pronounce. It's like beef carpaccio and super fancy stuff, and it has to be served on china plate. Like, this is just a gross waste of taxpayers' money. And I have to stress, it wasn't always like this, okay? The reason the term public servant exists is because it used to be people like retired teachers, former police officers, local small business owners who donate their time for a tiny stipend, like they might get parking, they might get lunch, but it was a tiny stipend that they were paid to be a public servant. And now we're spending, would you say 50 grand? Sending them to Italy?
Just over 50 grand for the expenses, another 100,000 for the art.
This is where we mean when we say government waste and too big of government, because it should not be like this. Isaac, do you remember, did you go to Italy to get art for your school? Was that a regular field trip when you graduated?
I was going to say every good practicing Catholic knows the only place to get religious art is in the Vatican City, actually, in Italy. I'm pretty sure if this school board walked down the street to a church and just said, hey, do you guys know any art we could get? They would have gotten it for free. Could have maybe spent that 50 grand or 100 grand on something that would contribute to the school in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure there are a few examples that come to mind that don't include $100,000 paintings from the Vatican City itself. No wonder they're so expensive, eh?
They had to go straight to the source. And yeah, to be clear, for people who don't know, there are shops where you can go get religious art, like for real. And it's beautiful. And a lot of it is from Italy. but you don't need to pay $50,000 to local bureaucrats from the school board to fly there, stuff themselves full of gourmet food to bring it back to you. You can just pay for it, and it's not that much money. That is a ridiculous waste of money, but I really think it's important that we highlight this sort of stuff, especially in light of what we were talking about with the movement for the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, in the United States. If we can make cutting spending and reducing the size and power of government cool again, then we'll definitely be winning as taxpayers. Isaac, William, thank you both so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And folks, thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to share this show with someone you know needs to hear it. But remember, everything is off the record.
Chris, I just thought of a real good question for you. Every report and every data I've ever seen on essentially comparing public to private spending in various sectors has shown that private can do it better. I'm wondering if you know of any examples where the public sector can actually outperform the private sector.
The only one I know on the top of my head, because I've given this a lot of thought, is we fought a lot against ICBC. So that's the government monopoly on the auto insurance in British Columbia. And their rates are disgusting and they're through the roof, blah, 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 blah. The vast majority of the time, having private competition reduces the cost. I don't know why, but in Saskatchewan, they have a government-controlled auto insurance monopoly, and it's cheap. So I've basically not made eye contact with it because it's accidentally running on time. So I just don't want to spook them.
Don't break it.
It's just okay, I'm just going to forget that you exist. But that's the only one